What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So today I'm going to be doing my top 10 favorite comic book movies of all time. Keep in mind, this is my own personal favorite, okay? You don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree, you don't have to argue with me, you don't have to tell me how much my list sucks or how much you don't agree. That's not what this is about. This is just me telling you what my favorite comic book movies are. And as a matter of fact, I implore you to leave your top 10 lists down below. I would love to see what your top 10 favorite comic book movies of all time. Before I begin this video though, I want to say that I did see Avengers Endgame. Today is Saturday at the time of this recording. I saw it yesterday on Friday, and I did do a review. It's full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen Endgame, just be prepared. It's full of spoilers, but I did do a review for that. So anyway, with that being said, let's jump into this, my top 10 favorite comic book movies of all time. So we're gonna start with number 10. Now, even though number 10 is the last movie, it's not by any means like the one that I think it's still my favorite, but it's not like my least favorite, if that makes any sense. Like, just because it's number 10 and just because something's number 1 doesn't mean I like it either or. This is just the order that I put them in. Number 10 on my list is Logan. Oh my god. So first of all, I knew going into this movie that I was going to feel a kind of way going into this movie. And hold on, y'all, my phone is ringing. I knew that I was gonna be going into this movie feeling kind of way. I already knew. It was the last time we're gonna see Hugh Jackman playing this character, who's been playing this character since the year 2000, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, I knew going into this movie that I was going to feel a kind of way. The trailers for this movie made me feel a kind of way going in, and so I knew that as soon as we sat down and watched this movie, I was like, okay, I'm prepared. Like, the trailers got me. I'm prepared to die, basically. But the thing is that I wasn't expecting that movie to be what it was, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't expecting to, first of all, I wasn't expecting to sit in the theater for about 10 minutes after the movie had ended, like even through the credits, crying. Like, I saw it with a good friend of mine, and her and I both were sitting in the theater crying, like way just bawling our eyes out, because this is a character that we've been with for our whole lives. I was born in 1995. She was also born in 1995, and Hugh Jackman started playing this character in the year 2000. And again, like I said, I'll talk about that later, but like, that was pretty much my whole life. Like, I'll be 24 in 2 weeks, and that was 17 years out of my life that I was watching this character and I was growing up with this character, and it just meant so much to me. There's some stuff about that movie that like doesn't quite add up, but I didn't even care. That's the same way I felt about Avengers Endgame. There's some stuff that doesn't add up, but it didn't even matter, because what it did was perfect. It sent off the character in a beautiful way. They gave us a really raw, gritty look into the world and the life of Wolverine, and I don't know, man. I told myself that I'd probably never watch Logan ever again in my life, just because what it did to me emotionally. I don't think I could put myself through that again, but to be honest, I might watch it again. But yeah, number 10 is Logan. 9 on my list is actually Kingsman: The Secret Service. Now, before you start freaking out, Kingsman: The Secret Service is actually based off of a comic. It's distributed through Icon Comics, which I think is like you know how like DC has like Vertigo? I think Icon is like Marvel, and like a subset of Marvel or something like that. But it is based off a comic. I think the writer is like Mark Millar. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Millar or Miller, but it is a comic book movie, based off a comic, and it is a comic book movie, and I love that movie. I love Taron Egerton. I just love Colin Firth. I love Mark Strong. Like, just everything about the first Kingsman. The Golden Circle, I wasn't really messing with that movie. I thought it was okay, but the first one really grabbed me. I wasn't expecting to fall in love with that movie as much as I did, and I just thought that it was just a really interesting, complex, well, not really complex, but it was a really interesting movie, and I appreciated that, and I wish the second one was better, but hey, it is what it is. So number 8 on my list is actually the X-Men. I'm talking about the very first X-Men, the one that came out in the year 2000. I was 5 years old when this movie came out, and the reason why this is on my list, the movie itself is okay. I think looking back on it as an older person, I'm like, yeah, this is it's a fine little film. But the reason why it's on my list is because this is actually what introduced me to comics in the first place, was this first X-Men movie. My dad was a huge fan of this movie. We actually owned the DVD, and like owning a DVD back then was like really, really impressive. Now everyone has everything on like iTunes and Amazon and whatever, but like having that on DVD was really interesting. We actually had it was like a cool like silver box with like the X in the middle, and it was like a really cool DVD, and we would always watch it, and I always had a good time. Plus I always always liked the idea of like mutants and powers and all that good stuff. I just loved it, and of course that's what introduced us to Wolverine in the first place, which is why I said in my Logan coverage that like that movie grabbed me so much. But my personal connection to the X-Men comes from the fact that that's what introduced me to comics in the first place. My brother was like, if you like X-Men, you're gonna love Batman. And I was like, now that I know about Batman, I'm like, these things aren't really the same, but I mean, he was like, if you like that kind of comic book things, you're gonna like, you know, Batman. And Batman and X-Men is what really kind of ushered me into reading comics and things like that. But yeah, I just thought X-Men was, you know, like I said, it's more of a personal thing. I watch it with my dad and my family all the time, but still, I thought it was, you know, I fucking love that movie. What can I say? I like it. Coming in at number 7 on my list is actually Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I can't talk about this movie enough. I love this movie, and at first I was trying to figure out where should I put it. I was like, I don't want to put it too high because there's other movies that mean a little bit more to me, but I was like, I don't want to put it too low because it deserves a higher spot. So I was like, I feel like number 7 is like kind of in the middle, but not really. I still fucking love that movie. It's one of the Marvel movies that I watch frequently, between that one and like maybe a couple of others. But with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I just thought that it was a really cool like political drama, and I think that it did something with Captain America, especially now that we have Endgame. I won't spoil Endgame just in case you haven't seen the movie and you're watching this video, but the way that they handled Captain America in that movie and his relationship with Bucky, and then we got to see it transpire in Civil War, and then of course in Endgame we kind of got to see a really nice, you know, like I said, I won't spoil it, but just, you know, a little bit of a wrap up. But I just thought that it was just a really nice, really cool action. There was like some weird like shaky cam stuff that the Russo brothers were doing in that movie that I really couldn't get over. But like the scene where Bucky, you know, turns around and grabs the shield, and then when they're fighting in the streets, and just that whole thing, it's just a really great action flick. But it also has a really good political undertone to it. And then of course Captain America was like, you know, very much straight by the books, but this was the movie that we really saw him pivot toward the Captain America that we know today, which is like going against the grain and doing what he thinks is right, even if it means breaking the law. So Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I can't talk about the movie enough. I think it's great. I fucking love that movie and I can't get over it. Coming in at number 6 on my list is probably going to piss some of you people off because a lot of people hated this movie. As a matter of fact, there are people that still talk about this movie to this day. This movie came out in 2016 and people are still talking about this movie to this day. Every time I get online, there's always a joke about Martha. There's always a joke about, you know, this. There's always a joke about that. And I'm talking about Batman versus Superman. Now, I really like this movie. I do. And I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that it's the perfect movie ever. I'm not gonna, you know, sit up here and tell you that it does what it's supposed to do, because it kind of messed up the entire DC universe as far as I'm concerned, because they introduced an old Batman and they killed Superman off. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen that movie for some reason. But what it did was introduce Wonder Woman, which we already know that movie was great. I'll talk about that later. But what it did, more so than anything, was really put a spotlight on the mental struggles that Batman has. I'm not saying that other movies haven't done that, because they have, but I'm talking about this movie in particular, so don't come at me. But what I'm saying is like they put a spotlight on the struggles that Batman has, and they really put an emphasis on how lonely Superman is and how much his life is kind of I'm trying to phrase this right, but just how much and how like hard it is, I guess, for him to kind of exist, especially because he's alone. And Batman seeing Superman as this, you know, demon from above who could just come and, you know, blow the whole place up, as he said in the movie, I think was really interesting. And when they finally got around to fighting each other at the very end, and he was like, you know, you're letting him kill Martha, and Superman says this to him, and Batman of course is like, that's when the whole thing of like, why did you say that name happened. And I understood that scene perfectly. To be honest with you, it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, because in Superman's mind, he doesn't know Batman's family, right? And in Batman's mind, he's seeing Superman as this all-powerful, all crazy, you know, scary being who could blow the whole place up if he wanted to, and he's not thinking of him having parents. You know what I'm saying? I think Batman saw him as a weapon that needed to be stopped, and that if he has parents, they probably are the same as him. They're probably just as scary. And so when he says you're letting him kill Martha, he figured if you can figure out who I am, you can figure out who Martha is. And for him to say that, Batman hears this name and he's like, why did you say that name? Because that's my mother's name. And then of course Lois comes in and she's like, that's his mother's name. And that's when Batman really clicked. And that's why in that particular scene you see the whole flashback scene of Batman remembering the scene of his mother being killed right in front of him. Now for all of you guys who are complaining about that scene being dumb, let me direct you to Captain America the Winter Soldier, where he's fighting fucking Crossbones in the street and he says, oh yeah, Bucky is still alive, and he just stops and then the thing blows up and Scarlet Witch stops it. That was Batman's mother. That was his mom, okay? His mother, who he saw get gunned down right in front of her. If you heard your mom's name in that way, especially if you're in Batman's point of view, aren't you gonna take a step back? Aren't you gonna be like, why are you saying that? Like, who are you? How do you know my parents' name? Especially my mother, who he obviously had a good relationship with. And of course, I can't leave this section of talking about Batman versus Superman without talking about, of course, the incredible scene of Wonder Woman falling from the sky. Well, not really falling, but jumping down from the sky and blocking that beam from Doomsday and leaping into action. And her theme was going. I fell apart. I have Wonder Woman sitting right here, if you can see it. I know it's kind of a glare because I have my windows open, but she is my girl. Great. So for all of you who don't like Batman vs. Superman, fine. That's fine. I think the movie is great, and I understand why people don't like it. I understand that it kind of shifted some things in the DC universe, but for this movie alone, just looking at it as a film and not something a part of a larger universe, I thought it did what it was supposed to do, and I love that movie. Now here we get into my top 5, and coming in at number 5 is actually a film that I saw a little bit after my birthday, because it came out May 6th, I believe. My birthday's May 8th, but me and my family didn't see it until like maybe a couple days later, and we saw it at night, and we were pretty much the only people in the theater because we were seeing it at night. But we had the whole row. It was like me, my brother, my god sister, my god brother, another good friend who's basically my brother because I've known him my whole life, but it was just like a whole row of us, and we were screaming our heads off. I know I was screaming my heads off, but the sheer excitement and joy that I saw watching The Avengers 1, which came out in 2012, oh my god, this is such a fantastic movie. It's literally just like a straight to the point plot, but seeing all these characters come together, and I mentioned in my in-game review that I'm kind of light on the MCU, but there are some movies that I absolutely love, like I said, Winter Soldier, and of course this movie here, which I stole from my brother, don't tell him. But I just thought that this was the culmination of all of these characters, and at the time I wasn't really like into the movies at that point. Like I just recently started like watching them, I would say like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but this movie at the time, I mean, there wasn't really much at the time that it came out, but you know, I'd seen like Iron Man 1, which I really enjoyed, and Thor 1, and so on and so forth, but like in Captain America the First Avenger, which I thought, the first time I saw that movie I was like, this is boring, and the second time I was like, that's actually not too bad. But this movie right here, seeing the Incredible Hulk turn around being like, I'm always angry, and he punches that goddamn Chitauri thing, and I was just like, oh my god. I just remember the joy of like, you know, celebrating my birthday, but also being there with my family, and then just seeing all the characters in that cool like wraparound shot with the Avengers and Hulk screaming and Black Widow, you know, changing out the guns, and you know, Thor twisting the hammer and Iron Man flying down, and it was just, you know, I just, that movie is just, it makes me feel good, and I'll never forget the way I felt watching that movie and experiencing that movie, especially with my family. My whole family were just screaming our heads off watching that movie, and I'll never forget that. Coming in at number 4 is, of course, Wonder Woman. There she is. So Wonder Woman, of course, is number 4, and I was not expecting to love this movie as much as I did. As a matter of fact, I think the more I think about it and the more I watch the movie and the more I see how much that movie has impacted my own personal being and just like other people that I see online, the more that I just appreciate this movie. I got to go to, I got a free ticket to see this movie at the very first time I saw it. I took me and my sister-in-law, and we had such an amazing time. We ended up running into one of her friends, and we got popcorn and drinks, and you know, it was like a couple days advanced screening. I think we saw it like at the end of May, and it came out at the beginning of June, so we saw it like a couple days early, and we got to see like the whole screen and everything, and they were passing around this Wonder Woman like tiara thing, and I got to take a picture with it, and it was just a full-on experience of joy, of feeling that this character Wonder Woman has been around since what, the 40s. It's been a little over 75 years of this character, and she has just made such an Wonder Woman is such an icon. She is the female superhero. You know what I'm saying? I think when you think of the best female heroes, Wonder Woman is usually number one, or at least she's at least top 3. And I can't imagine this movie coming out at a more perfect time, and it was just the movie was so good, and seeing Diana blast those bullets with her gauntlets and run across that no man's land scene, oh my god, and her theme, and yeah, the last act is kind of weird and it's kind of lame, and there's a smoke demon flying around with Ares, but honestly that movie, I can overlook that because what it does is introduce obviously Diana and gave her a really proper origin story. But it did something for the character. She was a strong character, both physically and mentally. She did what she was supposed to do, and she just so happened to be a woman, which is great. And I love the fact that they didn't put a lot of SJW into this. I like the fact that, Steve Trevor and the rest of the guys that she was with were very much her equal. Obviously, they knew that there was some shit that they can't do that she was doing, and they knew that, and they played to her strengths. And it was just a very much an equal film all around, and I just appreciate that. My favorite line in that movie, and every time I hear it, I've seen that movie probably 8 times at this point. I'm not even kidding, I've seen that movie so many times, but the line that gets me every time, and it gets me a little emotional every time I think about it, is when she's getting ready to leave and her mother comes and sees her, and she says this:
"You may never return. Who will I be if I stay?"
Every time I see that, it just gets to me, because I won't get into my own personal life or anything like that. This is not that kind of video. That's another video for another time. But just that resonated so much with me. We are not crying in this video. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. Let's just jump in. Let's just jump on to number 3. But Wonder Woman is perfect and amazing, and thank God for Patty Jenkins, and thank God for Zack Snyder for casting Gal in the first place. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman is probably the best casting since, Iron Man and Cap, Henry Cavill as Superman. I said what I said. It's amazing. So coming in at number 3 on my list is probably going to be another controversial film, because a lot of people didn't really connect with this movie, I guess. Some people did, some people didn't. Some people feel like this is not a accurate representation of this particular character, but for the past couple days I've been rewatching these top 10 movies just to see where they fall on the list, and I was actually surprised that this movie got so is number 3 on my list. I wasn't expecting it to be as high, but when I watched this movie again, and I was really watching it as not like a critic or anything, or just me connecting with the movie, and I was actually surprised by how much I was moved by this movie, probably more than I was watching. I don't know, something about this movie means a lot to me, and I'm talking about Man of Steel. I know you're probably throwing tomatoes at me, but you know what, I love this movie. If you could see, this is the most incredible artwork. This is just so awesome. I love this movie. So thank you, Zack Snyder, for this movie, and thank you, Henry Cavill, for being Superman. Please come back. There's that was dusty, but I love this movie. Something about that movie just means something to me. I don't know if it's just the way they've written the character in this particular movie. I don't know if it's the way that Zack Snyder directed the film. I don't know if it has anything to do with the music. The score, Hans Zimmer's score for this movie was just absolutely incredible. If you guys haven't listened to the soundtrack to this movie, between this soundtrack and Batman vs. Superman soundtrack, it is amazing. I think what got me for this movie was Superman taking flight for the first time, and seeing him kind of struggle with it at first, and then that really amazing moment where he falls down and he closes his eyes and he looks up in the sky and then he just blasts off. That was just, I don't know, I saw this movie with my aunt, and I was just in awe by how much I love that movie. And of course they gave us one of the greatest DC villains ever, and that's General Zod. I said it. I'll talk about another DC villain later when we get to my my next movie, but they gave us General Zod. Michael Shannon does an incredible job playing that character. My favorite part is when he's like, "You think you could threaten my mother?" It's so good, and that action is amazing. And then just like that scene where Michael Shannon grabs the dirt and he's like, "This, you know, what does he say? Oh my God, what's the line?" Here's the line.
Look at this. We could have built a new Krypton in this squalor, but you chose the humans over us. I exist only to protect Krypton. That is the sole purpose for which I was born. And every action I take, no matter how violent or how cruel, is for the greater good of my people. And now, I have no people.
That right there is just, oh, that movie is just, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people, like, go back and watch this again, okay? And if you're like a DC hater, then you probably won't like it. But if you're just like a casual person, I think you might enjoy this movie if you watch it again and you just really enjoy it. The movie takes its time to develop. Like, nothing really happens until the very end, I'm gonna be honest with you. But we got to just see Henry Cavill be Superman. We got to see Michael Shannon be General Zod. And of course they did justice, in my opinion, I think they did justice to Lois Lane, who has been around as long as his character, by the way. Lois Lane was introduced at the same time that he was. She's been around for 80 years. That is the female, you know, character. But Amy Adams, I thought, it's just Lawrence Fishburne is Perry White. It's just, I don't know, there's something about this movie. I'm just gonna hold it up. There's something just about this movie that, I don't know, I just connect with it. I love Wonder Woman on a really spiritual level, but this one I love on a personal level. So I don't know, it's just, Man of Steel is great in my opinion. So now we're getting into my top two. Now my top two, this is probably gonna piss my brother off because when I sent him my list, he was like, why is this not number one? But you know what? I'm gonna talk about, when I get to number one, why I love that movie so much, okay? And I might start crying. As a matter of fact, I'm expecting to cry. I'm just gonna let it out because sometimes I'd be wanting to cry, but I don't want to let it out because when I start crying, I just keep going. But number two on my list, and I'm putting all three of these movies together. Because I can't figure out which one would be first or second or third, but all three of these movies are linked. And that, of course, is the Dark Knight trilogy. I know. Why is it not number one, bitch? What's number one? We'll get there, and I'll talk about the reason why. But this was such a complex look at the city of Gotham and Batman's villains. I think that, like, how do I even begin talking about the Dark Knight, right? Or just the Dark Knight trilogy. It's so complicated to say what I feel about this movie because there's not enough time. But I remember when I watched The Dark Knight, the first one, okay? Because I watched that one first because I didn't realize Batman Begins was in the same sequence. Don't know why. But I saw Batman, or The Dark Knight first, and then I saw Dark Knight Rises, and then I went back and watched Batman Begins. The way that they I'm trying to get my thoughts together because it's just an incredible film about Gotham and Batman, and it's not really a comic book movie even though it's based off comic book characters. It's so much more than that. It deserved the best picture at the Oscars. I said it, but it didn't get it, obviously, or I don't even think it got nominated. I don't even know. But like, Heath Ledger as Joker, first of all, rest in peace to that man. He's phenomenal actor, and I'm sad that he's gone. But he did such an amazing job playing the Joker. And then Tom Hardy, who's actually my favorite actor, plays Bane. And, you know, well, I'm gonna try to do the voice, but it was like, I was wondering what would break first, your mind or your body? It's a terrible Bane voice, but it's just, guys, I don't even know how to describe my feelings towards the Dark Knight trilogy. They're just absolutely incredible films. And I think they get better over time. Christopher Nolan is he is a director. He is the director, and I can't thank him enough for giving us those films. Especially as a huge Batman fan, I actually have my tattoo here is actually Batman, and of course, you know, I have my cup. Batman is my favorite character, and there's a lot of personal reasons why I like that character, not just because he's Batman and he's cool, but just that movie is it's different. You know what I'm saying? It's just a different kind of film, and I'm always gonna appreciate this movie. And every time someone asks, "What's your favorite comic book movie?" This will always be on the list. Doesn't matter which one you put, all three, or you just put one or two, this will always be on the list because it is so complex and it's so unique and it's so different and it's so beyond, I think, any of these movies that we've ever gotten. I think maybe I'm biased because it's a Batman movie, but like I don't think any comic movie is ever gonna get better than this. You probably don't agree, and that's fine. But for me personally, this is the franchise, the movie, and it's always like nothing is gonna get better than this. At least not for me. Now, finishing off my list at number 1 is a movie that I used to watch all the time when I was growing up. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is my favorite movie, my favorite comic movie. That's not my favorite movie, but it is my favorite comic movie. And it's for personal reasons. And this is Spider-Man 2. Now, I'm talking about the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2. This is the Spider-Man that I grew up with. I thought Andrew Garfield was an amazing Spider-Man. I just thought he was stuck in not very good movies. The first one I thought was okay. The second one was not very good. And Tom Holland, that's over there. I don't mind Tom Holland, but this is my Spider-Man. And I prefer Spider-Man a teenager in the comics, right? But when he's in live action, I prefer him to be a little bit older. And I think that's the reason why I resonate so much with the Amazing Spider-Mans and then this Spider-Man, because I prefer him to be an adult in the movies for some reason. I think it just works a little bit better in the movies. Because in the comics, I'm like, he needs to be a teenager all the time. So it always throws me off when he's not a teenager in the comics, but that's just me. And I read the hell out of Spider-Man comics, but for me, I think that this was an incredible film. I love the first one as well. The first Spider-Man movie is kind of also attached to this number 1 as well, but Spider-Man 2, there's a scene in this movie, okay, that I actually recently, for my humanities class, we were doing a particular paper, and I wrote about this particular movie, and then a couple weeks ago, or just 2 weeks ago actually, I did a paper about Batman, which I got an A on, so you know, I feel kind of special about that. But in the first paper that we had to do, we were talking about it was back in like February or March, and it's now almost May, so I don't remember the context of the paper, but I wrote about this. And when I was writing this paper, I started crying because I realized how much this movie means to me, and on a really deep personal level. And this came out, Spider-Man 2 I think was 2004, and let me double check, but this movie was Spider-Man 2 2004. This movie was just, you know, there's a line in this movie where it's not just a line, it's a whole like dialogue, right? So Spider-Man, of course, as we know, this is not a spoiler if you haven't seen this movie. That's 2004, that was a long time ago, but there's a line in this movie where Spider-Man obviously stops being Spider-Man, and he goes to visit Aunt May, and this little kid comes up, and he's like helping her like fix her you know, she's like cleaning out her closet or her shed or whatever, and the little kid looks up at Peter and he's like, oh, you photographed for Spider-Man, is he gonna come back? And you know, Pete's like, I don't know, and he's like, oh man, I really hope he comes back. And then he runs away, and Aunt May is like, you know, he talks about Spider-Man all the time, he wants to be him when he gets older. And she goes on, oh my god, she goes on this huge, don't cry, she goes on this huge just that whole scene, her saying like people will wait in line for hours and hours for the person who just reminded them to hold on. Oh god, what a mess. But that particular scene is the reason why this movie is number 1 on my list. It's just an incredible moving scene, and don't even get me started on like the action, because the action, especially for it being a movie that came out in 2004, was amazing. You know, the whole, you know, he's sitting in the coffee shop with Mary Jane, and you know, his spider senses come, and the fucking car gets thrown in, and he jumps over her, and he becomes Spider-Man again, and he's fighting Dr. Octavius throughout the city, and the arms are going, and they're fighting on the roof, and Aunt May is falling, and then they're on the train at one point, and then the guy, you know, rips his mask, his mask gets ripped off, and he's like pulling the train. That scene, oh my god, like, oh girl, y'all, I'm a mess. But that whole scene, and then his mask gets ripped off, and then, you know, he stops the train, and then they're like floating his body back, and he wakes up, and the little kid hands him his mask, and he's like, don't worry, we won't tell nobody. And I was like, oh my god, it's just, I don't know what maybe because Spider-Man, like Batman is number 1, Spider-Man is number 2 for me when it comes to my favorite characters. But like, I don't know what it is. It just means something to me. You know what I'm saying? And Spider-Man 2 will always be my favorite comic book movie ever. To be honest with you, I think it's not my favorite movie of all time, but it is on my list of favorite movies of all time. It's probably like number 5 because I have some other stuff that just, if I start talking about my favorite movie of all time, I'll just die right here on camera. But Spider-Man 2 is just an amazing look at Spider-Man, and it does so well. And I personally think this movie aged well. I think it still holds up. And at the time this movie came out, it was considered the best comic movie of all time, which, you know, now everyone is in this Marvel Cinematic Universe age where they're like, nothing gets better than these movies. And I'm like, this does, in my opinion. This movie will always, you know, surpass all of that. At least, you know, that's just me, my personal opinion. But Spider-Man 2 is just, it's an amazing movie. And I can't wait to continue to watch this movie. I can't wait to share it with people that have never seen it before. If you've never seen Spider-Man 2, what are you doing with your life? Go and watch that movie. It's amazing. As a matter of fact, go watch all these movies on my list because they're just incredible. Some will make you cry like Logan, and some will make you feel empowered like Wonder Woman, and some will just make you want to squee, and that's Avengers. But Spider-Man 2 is just, I don't know, man. I don't want to start crying again because I'm not trying to be out here like that, but it's just, you know what? It's just amazing, and I can't rave about Spider-Man 2 enough. And it's, you know, X-Men introduced me to comics, but Spider-Man 2 introduced me to a more personal side, I think, of why I connect with these characters so much. Oh, I'm gonna start crying again. Gotta wrap this up. So there you have it. That is my list, and I'll go through them one more time just in case you missed it. So number 10, of course, was Logan. Number 9 was Kingsman: The Secret Service. Number 8 was the X-Men, the first X-Men from 2000. Number 7 was Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Number 6, Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. I didn't mention this, but I'm talking about the extended version, the Ultimate Edition. So just throwing that out there. Number 5, of course, was the Avengers, the very first Avengers. Number 4 was Wonder Woman, and number 3, Man of Steel. Number 2 is the entire Dark Knight trilogy, which technically that would make my list more than just 10, but whatever. And of course, number 1 was Spider-Man 2. So thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed this. I know my thoughts were all over the place, but hey, that's just me. This is just me. I'm never just straight. I'm all over the place. But anyway, leave your thoughts down below. What are your top 10 favorite comic book movies? Or you don't necessarily give me 10, but just give me a couple that you think are just incredible. Give me your comic book movies that will nothing, even if it's the greatest thing ever, nothing will ever get better in your personal opinion. Because as far as I'm concerned, nothing gets better than Spider-Man 2 in my opinion. And I said it, but of course there's movies that are way better than that, but my own personal feelings, nothing just gets better than that movie. Just the way it makes me feel is why all these movies are on my list, and they're, you know, on that list in a particular way. So of course, like I said, leave your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.